Okay, good evening everybody, and a very warm welcome to everybody in the room here this evening, and also a warm welcome to those watching us on Hillingdon's YouTube channel this evening. First and foremost, just an apologies for the slightly later than advertised start time. Previous meeting overran slightly, so thank you for your flexibility for those here this evening and those watching, and indeed for those members and officers who've waited patiently for this meeting to commence. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell, and I am the Chairman of Central and South Planning Committee. Warm welcome to everybody again. We've got a few items of housekeeping to cover off, so I'll do those before we do any introductions. So the first thing is we've got quite a few people here this evening witnessing this evening's proceedings. There are some brightly coloured orange feedback forms that we'd encourage you to fill in. So obviously any feedback is gratefully received, and for those people that are watching us on YouTube, there is a link below the broadcast this evening, so that will take you direct to the feedback form on the council's website. In terms of other housekeeping arrangements, there are no emergency evacuations due this evening, but in the unlikely event that we do need to leave the building quickly, officers will direct us out of the nearest fire exit or emergency exit and direct us down to the front of the building to the assembly point. In terms of mobile phones, I would ask that everybody present in the room here this evening switch their phones either off or to silent, so to avoid any disruptions. Right, that's the housekeeping element of this evening done. There's quite a few people around the table here this evening, so I'm going to do some introductions as to who these people are. I'm going to start on my left. For the voting members this evening is Councillor Duncan, welcome, Councillor Dillon and Councillor Birra. And on my right here I have Councillor Roy Chamdale, who's also the Vice Chairman of this committee. I've got Councillor John Morgan, Councillor Nicola Brightman, Councillor Shreya Aquila Malana and Councillor Alan Chapman. So those are the voting members this evening. I'm also joined around the table by officers of the council. So I'll start on my immediate right here is James Roger, who is the Head of Planning and Enforcement. He will be supported, and presenting tonight's applications will be Meg Harani, who's the Team Leader for Planning, and for any highways issues this evening, that will be covered off by Ahmed Akram. So welcome. On my left I have Anisha Teji, who's here from Democratic Services. She will be keeping me in check as chairman, but also keeping a record of this evening's proceedings. We also have Kerry Monroe, who is our planning lawyer, who's here to advise us on any legal matters that might come up this evening. So those are the housekeeping arrangements and introductions. We've just got a few elements to cover off before we can start to get in to discuss the applications themselves. So number one, apologies for absence.
No apologies.
Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest in matters coming before this evening's meeting. Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got non-pecuniary interest on agenda item 19. I will be leaving the room. I will be taking part in it.
Okay, no thank. Any other declarations of interest? No? Okay, coming on to item 3, which is to sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting. So can I take those as agreed? Agreed. Excellent. We'll move on. So items 4 on the agenda is any matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. I don't think we have any. No. So then it's also then just item 5, which is just to cover off how the meeting is structured this evening. So items in part 1 are discussed in public, hence why we're all here this evening, and items in part 2 are discussed in private, so we will be asking members in the public section to quietly leave, and the YouTube feed will be disconnected at that point. That's because we are discussing enforcement issues which could have legal implications attached to them, so they're not in public. Okay. We do have a fairly busy evening this evening. We have 4 petition items to be getting through. So I will be inviting, when we get to that point, Panita Mayer. Okay. Right, yep. So when we get to that point, I will be inviting a number of petitioners this evening. What will happen at that point is people will come up to the table here. There will be a traffic light, as you can see on the desk in front of us. That traffic light system gives people 5 minutes to address the committee, both petitioner and applicant. When we get to 5 minutes is the total time. When it gets to 4 minutes, it will go to amber, and when it gets to 5 minutes, it will go to red. And at that point, I will stop the conversation. But on that note, we will go to item 6 on the agenda, which is land rear of 89 to 91 Goldshort Gardens and Haystall Close in Hayes. So over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to land to the rear of 8991 Goldshort Gardens and adjoining 1 Haystall Close. The application is for a 2-storey building to provide two bedroom flats. If I can take members to the history section, they'll see that this is the 3rd application relating to this site. The second one was presented to this committee in August of last year, and it was refused for the reasons set out. This is an amended version of that to overcome or try and overcome the reason for refusal. And if I can just go to the plans, it's a site plan. That shows the siting of the building. Now, the building is sited so that it follows the building line along Haystall Close. The previous application included a building attached to 8991 in this position. That has now been removed. It also included insufficient parking, and it was refused for those reasons. This application includes sufficient parking for the 2 flats in terms of 2 spaces to the front here, 2 to the side for the flats there, and these 2 for the occupiers of 89 and 91 Goldshort Gardens. The siting and number of crossovers now complies with the council's requirements. The number of parking spaces complies with the council's requirements, and in terms of the size and scale of the building is now sited so that it is in line and it follows the design and size and scale of the existing buildings. So given all of those issues, your officers consider that the application is now acceptable and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Meg. Okay, that brings us to the point now where we can start to hear from organisers of a petition for this particular item. So can I invite Panita Mayor? No Panita? Okay, so the applicant or agent, I've got a Mr. Alan Salter. Mr. Salter, would you like to come to the table? Whilst you get yourself organised there, I'll just do a quick reminder. You have 5 minutes to address this committee this evening. When you get to 4 minutes, the light will go yellow, and when we get to 5 minutes, it will go red, and I will have to bring you to an end. So if you press the grey button in front of you when you're ready, and we'll hear what you've got to say.
Yes, good evening, thank you. My company, H. Parfitt & Sons Limited, built the development of Haystall Close and Goshawk Gardens in 1955. Part of the original development provided garages for 89 and 91 Goshawk Gardens at the rear. The garages have not been used for many years and have become redundant, as they are too far from the properties and are now derelict. Our architect has designed a development that is keeping with the area and will improve the appearance. That has always been our intention. The design of the 2 flats complies with all requirements regarding size and amenity spaces. The important issue of off-street parking has been addressed. The new crossover of Haystall Close to the southern end will provide parking close to 89 and 91 Goshawk Gardens, which they did not have previously. Parking for the new units will be where the garage area is currently, and there will be additional car parking with a crossover off Hastel Close. The open aspect will be improved by providing a low brick wall to the front gardens in place of the existing 1.8 metre high fence. Landscaping of the whole area will be included as part of the new development. I trust the councillors will agree with the planning officer's proposal that this application is recommended for approval, and I thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Salter. If you want to sit there for a second,
Yes.
because members may have some
Yes.
questions for you. So I'm just going to, at that stage, invite members for any questions. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I note on the submitted plans that the parking for residences 1 and 2, the 2 new flats, are shown together and quite close to the living room of the ground floor proposed new flat. Is there some flexibility in that, so that those 2 spaces could potentially, it's marked on the plans and it's the plans we approved, so that those 2 spaces could be for the ground floor flat and the other 1 or 2 for the upper flat, so that there's no disturbance?
Yeah, the living area is at the rear of the proposal. The front of the proposed flats, which will be looking out towards the garage space, is in fact a kitchen area.
Yeah, it actually shows it as a through area, so it's living.
Yeah, but the living area is at the rear. The kitchen and the sink unit and the units are at the front, so that will be the kitchen area.
I do see that. But if there was any... So you're saying there's no flexibility in this?
I think that is the best place for them, actually.
I'm not talking about removing them, I'm just talking about who they're allocated to in the interest of neighbourliness and noise disturbance.
I think Head of Planning James Rogers will come in.
I'm not sure whether we can ask the applicant to agree an allocated parking condition or not, but to be quite frank, we could impose a allocated parking condition.
Thank you very much.
And I'd be happy to recommend members add such a condition.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Salter? No? Okay, if you could turn your microphone off, sir, and then just return to your seat there.
Thank you.
If you could switch the button. Thank you. Okay, I note we have a ward councillor in the public area. Councillor Fife, are you looking to address the committee? Now, Councillor, I know you're well versed in how these things work, but for the benefit of those members of the public here this evening, councillors have a total of 3 minutes to address the committee. 2 minutes on amber, 2 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and then red. I will apply the same rules to councillors and bring you to the natural conclusion. So, over to you, Councillor Fife.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They've got to put 2 electric parking bays. Where are they going to be located?
I think there was a question. Is there any other points you want to cover off? Maybe we'll get your
Yes.
questions at the end. Otherwise, you're eating into your 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm still a bit confused about the parking, because I take it that 89 and 91 are 2-bedroom properties, the same as what the flats will be. So my understanding is that they're having 2 for the flats, 2 of them are for visitors, and 89-91, and 2 for 89-91 as well. Right.
We'll ask officers to address that when you've concluded your time, yeah?
We come to the PTLA. Now, my understanding is that it's very poor. My understanding is that there is 2 bus services go past literally the end of Hayman's Crescent. one being the 192 and one being the U7. So with 2 bus services, is that being classed as poor service? Because I think the U7 is every 20 minutes, and I think probably 192 is maybe every 20 minutes. About that, yeah. I read the believe it said there was only going to be 1 crossover per property, but you've actually got 2, 4, 6. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fife. We'll pick up those points that you've raised, but is there any questions for Councillor Fife? Okay. Well, before you return to your seat, there was sort of 3 points there as I captured. So there was a question around parking allocation, P-tail ratings, and crossover allocation. So can we pick up those points for the councillor?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the parking, members can see that 2 spaces are provided to the front of the new building, 2 to the side of it, and then 2 to the side of 8991. Those 2 are for the occupiers of the new building, and these 2 are then occupiers of the existing building. Currently, the occupiers of the existing building were, although the applicant stated in his presentation that they were unused, they did have garages originally to the rear, 1 each, so they had 1 space each, and that is what is being replaced in this position here. And in terms of the new dwellings, they have 2 spaces per dwelling, which complies with the council's requirements. So there is no net loss of parking, and the additional parking that's being provided complies with the council's requirements and policies. In terms of the P-tail rating, that's based on a number of things, including the bus service, or the number of bus services, or it includes access to other levels of public transport, such as trains, tube lines, and so on. So it's not just a question of how many bus services there are, and the P-tail rating is given on based on the number of services that the site has access to, as well as the frequency of the buses. It's not a comment on the quality of the service, the bus services that are provided. And the final question was the number of crossovers is 3. There are 3 properties being proposed, and generally we would try to limit the number of crossovers to 1 per property, and that is what is being proposed. So you've got 8991 as 1 property, and then the 2 new dwellings, so or the 2 new units that are being proposed, so they each have a crossover. So that is the number of crossovers that are being provided.
Okay.
And again, that complies. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor. You can return to your seat now. Appreciate your input this evening. Okay, right, that's the presentation from officers. We didn't have the petitioner in attendance this evening, and we've heard from both the ward councillor and the applicant stroke agent. Just before we open it up to members, I think we know this scheme has been in front of us before, and we've heard this evening that the principal sort of redesign of this addresses parking crossover, and there's no issues in concern of size and scale. So on that note, I will throw it open to members. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a much better scheme than it was previously. We didn't like that at all last time. I know Councillor Duncan has concerns about the parking arrangement, and would like a condition on those. I would echo that. But besides that, it's within policy now, so I would be in favour of the scheme.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan, and then we'll come to Councillor Chandale, Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like the 2 spaces that are closest to the ground floor. It isn't a high-level window that's unopenable. We can see from the elevations that it's a normal window, and I just think to have 2 cars park there. It's perfectly acceptable as long as it's for this ground floor property. You don't want somebody coming back at 1 o'clock in the morning and waking your baby. So that's easily resolved, I think, if we could ask officers to condition that. The other thing I would point out is that the plans show 2 parking spaces next to 8991, then 2 on one side of the development, 2 in front of it. But on the elevations, here are 2 here, 2 here, and there's just a driveway, and 2 aren't shown here. So when we approve the plans, I know it's the plans that we approve, that's the legal document, we would need to point out that it's these plans we're approving and that this is an elevation that doesn't quite match up with it, but we assume that that was meant to have been matching.
An artist's impression, maybe.
No.
The actual...
Very artistic.
I can come in there. The sort of perspectives are not plans that we're actually approving, so what we are approving are the layout plans and the elevations. The perspectives are, as you say, artists' impressions, and they can get very artistic, so they're not plans that we are approving, and they're not on the plans list as approved plans.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can
I'm
just
reassured.
the bit I'm actually referencing is condition 2, because that's our compliance condition, and as Meg G's mentioned, it's only listed 5 plans, so it hasn't included all of the plans in the plan pack. I was just going to say as a general point, what I think a positive of this particular scheme is we often have these kind of infill or backland, dependent on how one feels to describe these schemes, where they don't quite fit in with the street scene, and I think this applicant has really tried hard to do something that actually would ultimately fit in with the street scene, so that at a future date, if you were to go out to this particular site, it wouldn't stand out as an incongruous proposal, because it's been designed to fit in with the actual with the wider street scene. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you.
I'd just say on these plans that it does show in the drawing numbers these aerial views. They're actually listed in our documentation. So 3455/28 revision C is the one that I was referring to. I mean, I do accept that it's not meant to be, but we need to be precise about exactly what it is we're doing here. So just a point, anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, I can see 20. Yeah, so could I have delegation authority to make sure we get exactly all the right plans? I can see run 1 in condition 2 that shouldn't be in condition 2.
Thank you very much.
You are right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Lots of rustling of paper in my right hand here there. Okay, Councillor Chamdell.
Thank you, Chairman. I think most of the points I was going to raise has been raised by Councillor Duncan. These pictures are great when they print them. You know, 1 car on the road, there's no congestion. You know, we experience enough committee members to really, you know, put these on their back burners when we see these things, and well pointed out. Listen, it's come before us again. It's a much better design than previously. Last time, you know, it stuck out like a sore thumb. And I think the developer has finally come up with something which is more acceptable, and I want to formally propose we go with the officer's recommendation with the adjustments that Councillor Duncan has just mentioned.
Did Councillor Dillon move that? Did you?
I didn't know.
You didn't? Okay. So that you're moving officer's recommendation, Councillor? Yeah? Okay. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't here for the first time this came in front of us, but however, I do have some concerns on this. In particular, our back garden or backland development. Can you confirm that this is within our policy? That we're not actually back garden grabbing here, and also to go further with Councillor Duncan's parking situation. Surely the people in flat number 2 will not be parking in front of flat number 1. They'll be using the visitor space, which is next door to their house. So you'll end up with flat 1 using both spaces in front of them, and flat 2 using both spaces that's to the side of their property, thus leaving only 2 spaces for 89 and 91. I think that if we do have conditions, we've got to have to really have very, very tight conditions on this. Otherwise, it won't be worth putting down.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Backland development, any answers to Councillor Morgan's question?
We have had appeal decisions where we've tried to claim that this is backland development, and basically the inspectors have said, well, this has got a frontage, so it isn't backland development. This has a frontage and therefore it's not classed as backland development. It does include a part of the amenity space, if you like, of 8991, but the majority of the space is still being retained, and it includes, or was previously, had garages on it, so did have a building on it. So it's a difficult one, but it's not really what officers would class as garden grabbing in this particular case, and therefore that's the reason why we've gone for an approval in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Now the condition around allocated parking has been mentioned a couple of times. James, is there anything you can do to help members understand what that might look like?
Well, we can impose a condition that requires a plan indicating precisely which parking space goes to which unit, and we can even add an informative telling the applicant what we expect that plan to indicate. So, and I think committees give a pretty clear steer of what it would expect that plan to indicate. So, in effect, I do agree with Councillor Duncan's point that there's a habitable room, that you only want the parking in front of it to be used by the occupiers of that particular flat. So, I'm confident we can condition this to address the points that have been raised by councillors.
Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that, James? If you actually look at the plan that you've got here at the moment, unfortunately, being this far away, you can't actually read the writing. But outside flat 1, it says 2 parking spaces for residents of 1 and 2. Then to the side of number 2, it says visitor spaces for new units and numbers 89 and 91. As I said originally, people living in flat number 2 won't want to park outside number 1. They'll use the units, the parking spaces that's directly to the side of their house or their flat, which is visitors only according to the plan. So if it carries on down that line, the residents of 89 and 91 have just got 2 spaces between them.
Okay. Anything we can say to Councillor Morgan there?
I mean, what I'd say is you've got 6 parking spaces, which is enough for these units here, and the condition would start notwithstanding the submitted plan. So it would, in effect, would be getting a new plan that would indicate parking in the best and the optimum solution for the 6 spaces. And I won't go into any more details. I think members have discussed it.
It's been a good debate. I have the officer's recommendation moved by Councillor Chemdale. Do I have a seconder? So Councillor Duncan, that is seconded. So can I have a show of hands, please? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So is that abstentions? Councillor Morgan, Councillor. So that item is approved. Thank you. Right. Moving swiftly on to item number 7 on this evening's agenda, which again is a petition item, which we'll come on to later on. But this is looking at 1120 Uxbridge Road, Hayes. So over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application relating to 1120 Uxbridge Road in Hayes, and the application is for a change of use of the land from car wash to use as a tyre fitting business and alterations to the roof profile. If I can take members to the history section again, they'll note that there have been a number of applications relating to this site and for this particular use. There have been a number of applications that were refused. One was dismissed at appeal in 2014, but eventually in September of 2019 an application was approved for this particular use on this site. The reasons why the previous applications were refused related to noise implications for adjoining residents and the absence of a noise assessment, and that assessment was done for the application that was approved in 2019 and has been resubmitted for this application. And the noise assessment was assessed by the Council's Environmental Protection Unit and found to be acceptable, and they recommended a number of conditions which are attached to this particular application. The difference between the current application and the previous approval is an alteration to one of the buildings on the site, and if I can go to the plans, it's probably very difficult to see, but it's an increase in height by 400 millimetres to the building in this position here, which is set out on page. Have you got it there, James? Yeah. On page.
Members are certainly struggling to see the slide, so if we can ask members to refer to
it's
195.
much clearer on page 195. It's actually highlighted.
Yeah. So on page 195 you can see the existing and proposed elevations showing the alterations in the height of the building. As I say, it's 400 millimetres, and your officers consider that that alteration is acceptable in terms of the impact that it has on adjoining occupiers, particularly to the rear in Regent's Close, and therefore, with all other things being the same as the previous approval, we are recommending approval in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
And sorry if I can just show the photographs. That's the site. And the building actually in question is the one you see before you there. So these are the buildings that are being amended. This one, and so it's the white building in particular, and these are the rear gardens of Regent's Close. If I can, in there.
Okay.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry, I did forget to mention the addendum. There is an amendment to condition 2, just to add that there should be no working on Sundays and bank and public holidays. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Meg. Really do need to look at some of these slides for future meetings. But okay, we've got a petition for this particular item, so I'd like to invite Mr. Paul Scannell. Welcome, Mr. Scannell.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, there's a microphone in front of you with a grey button. You have 5 minutes to address the committee this evening. 4 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and when it gets to 5 minutes, I will draw you to a close. It's part of your 5 minutes. So if you could press the button and start to address the committee. Can you press the button, please, sir? And then people on at home can actually hear what you're saying.
Regent's Close, which adjoins this site, since May 1990. The business premises in question was obviously pre-existing to our residency. I've stated previously, both verbally and in writing to the Council, that during the period 1990 to the mid-2000s, we had no serious cause to complain about any of the operations on this site, any small objections being promptly dealt with on a casual and almost exclusively non-official basis. Since, however, the mid-2000s, and with various changes of ownership and use of the shop at 1118, Uxbridge Road, and this yard at 1120, which are connected, the previously symbiotic relationship between the businesses and residents changed, it seems, irrevocably forever. Any even cursory investigation of disputes reaching council level during the last 15 years will readily demonstrate what I'm saying. My recently deceased wife, Leslie, completely changed her opinion from the mid-2000s of our family residence. If we'd been in a financial position to move home, we would have done. Unfortunately, we were not. And this is something I suspect I'll forever now regret. I'm just going to briefly summarise the petition, which I'm sure you've had sight of, just the guts of it. Myself, Paul and Sonia and Peter, who are my near neighbours who are here this evening, have been in discussion with Hillingdon Council for some time since the surprising council approval of this change of use application earlier this year, which is last year. This matter remains unresolved, and are many questions relating to the validity of the application and its approval, the actual use of various parts of this site, constant breaching of designated hours of operation, noise and nuisance, erection of unauthorised signage, are also all awaiting conclusive council response or action. Our concern is for the future and what we all as residents in close proximity should expect in terms of safety and reasonable periods of peace and quiet undisturbed by operations within these premises. I'm sure that everybody's had sight of the application. This is number 3989. And the objection comments received, including my own. I haven't seen all of them. From this application, I would like to quote the confirmation of applicant's ownership certification, which implies responsibility for all activities on this site. I would add to this responsibility the question of the number of key holders with access, who do access this site. I've got way too many noted points and detailed questions to cover in this 5 minutes, but I can only highlight certain areas, and I welcome any questions on the following subjects you might wish to make bullet point notes. And these would be the proposed gate design, its location, and safety concerns in relation to it. I should add that I've previously communicated via his client with the applicant on this matter, and I've received no response. Also, the noise survey results and the practical application in line with the non-standard condition previously applied to the approval, i.e. the decibel reduction. Given that the existing car wash would still remain, breaches not even that level, it breaches the ambient background noise level in front of my property by a considerable margin already. And also, in that respect, that absolutely none of the suggested mitigating methods contained in the noise survey have been instigated, not one of them. Not one. I would also mention, presumably, unauthorised erection of signage. Two signs have been erected on the side of the building of 1118, which is on the side of the alley, which is overlooked by my back of my house and my neighbour's house. Also, operations outside of prescribed hours. Many notifications from myself and various other neighbours to the council in recent months, email and phone call. I do choose to mention the raising of the garage roof sections, and I completely, I'm afraid, dispute the 0.4 metre height. One section does appear to have been raised by 0.4 of a metre, but it's not the highest part. It was raised by, I would suggest, I haven't been and measured it, somewhere between 1 1/4 and 1.5 metres.
Scanner, I'm going to have to bring you to a
close
now.
That's fine.
Thank you for your time. Have you any questions for Mr. Scammell? Councillor Dillon.
The concerns that you've raised to the council on this already,
Yes.
have they been addressed
No.
at all? No.
Any other questions? So, thank you
Nor
very much.
responded to, in fact.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. If you could just press the button on your microphone and return to your seat, that would be great. And again, thank you for your time this evening. Okay, it's now time to hear from the applicant or agent. So do I have to Mr. Hamit Minas here? No? Okay. So we have no presentation from the applicant or agent. Councillor Fife, I see you're still lurking in the background there, eager to... Do I need to explain 3 minutes again to you? Surely not, surely not. So when you're ready, Councillor, you can press the grey button and we will start your 3 minutes.
As a matter of interest, which Mr. Scanlon has mentioned, I put that on an email to Mr. James Rogers on Sunday, so I presume he got it on Monday. But one of the other things I will mention, because obviously it's been mentioned before and don't want to mention it again, but the final point I'd like to make, is there any legal protection for residents of Regent's Close where ongoing noise and pollution will affect their quality of health and well-being?
Again, I would say if you want to just make your points and then otherwise you're eating into your 3 minutes waiting for answers. So you're concluded. Okay, thank you. Right, any questions from committee members to Councillor Fife? No? Okay, thank you, Councillor. We will pick up your points before we open up to members. So, legal protections for residents of Regent Close.
Thank you, Chairman. The protection that we have are the conditions relating to the hours of operation and the noise conditions, and the deliveries. If residents are saying that they are being breached, then that needs to be reported to enforcement, and we would need to ask our enforcement officers to make site visits at the appropriate times to find out whether that is the case, and then we go through the enforcement process. As I said, the site does have permission, so they are allowed to operate, and the conditions that are before you are very similar to the conditions that were granted on the previous approval. So the protection is there in terms of those conditions, and if residents are saying that they're not being complied with, then we need to ensure or check that that is the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, now we're going to throw this open for members to have their say. But before we do that, I mean, I think it's one thing to bear in mind that the tyre fitting business has been approved previously for this. So that's just to bear that in mind when we're making our comments. So, Councillor Morgan and Councillor Dillon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's more of a complaint to our officers here. I'm looking at these plans, even here in front of us, and it's extremely difficult to see what is being put forward. I'd almost turn around and say we can't make a judgment tonight on these plans. You know, I can't see, even looking at pages 194 and 195, what the new height is. I'm sorry, officers, I can't work with these.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon? Sounds like your thunder might have been stolen.
Indeed it has been. There's 2 points. One point was that the plans are useless. Yeah, I can't do anything with it. I can't read it, can't do anything with it. But the other question was the noise mitigation and the noise survey. How is that carried out, and how does that take into consideration noise, what the neighbours can hear rather than what the property is generating? That's how I feel, as if it's been done as if it's the noise that's being generated at the property, but not what's being heard at the... So if I could have an explanation of that, please.
Can we pick up Councillor Dillon's point?
the noise impact assessment they're done by experts who do such assessments on a regular basis, and there's a standard way of carrying out those assessments, and they then compare the existing noise levels against the noise levels that are generated by the proposed uses and businesses, and obviously they then give us a conclusion, and that has been assessed by our own environmental protection unit, and they've found that the assessment was carried out in a correct manner, and that the conclusions were that it was acceptable, subject to the conditions that are set out in the conditions or in the report. So the conditions relating to the hours of use and the noise to be measured against background noise levels. If those are breached, then we have an enforcement case which can go forward, and we need to check and measure whether those conditions are being breached.
I'm actually going to recommend members defer this item. I'll explain why. So we've got a petitioner that's queried the plans. Unfortunately, the printing hasn't worked in particularly well in this case, as correctly identified by the councillors. So that's the second point. And then the simplest way I think I can explain it without trying to bamboozle members is there's clearly a disconnect on the noise issues between what the residents are saying and what the councillor's noise expert is saying. It's not that one is right, it's wrong, and one is wrong. We've got residents referring to pressurised ratchet guns to cite one comment, and then we've got a noise officer that's referring to different things. So I actually think there's quite a few things arising that might suggest that members may wish to defer this one. It'd be more a matter of what you'd wish officers to look at closely before it comes back to planning committee. Might be a better the best thing to debate on this one rather than an approval or a refusal. So that would be my revised recommendation to committee.
Thank you, James. That may well change some of the comments coming forward, but Councillor Chamdale, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Exactly right. James, on page 31, we've got a report under 7.8 in the second paragraph from powers higher than us, which is the inspectorate, who has made the point that the use of a tyre business would have an impact on living conditions of nearby residents, particularly those in Regent's Close, and then he goes on to say about conditions. So I am concerned that it's wishy-washy about what actually are we talking about, what noise levels are we talking about, and how we're going to actually monitor them, and from which places are we going to do it from. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ahmed Bolana. Councillor Ahmed Bolana, you indicated?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a difficult one. It's a matter of suitability for this business on that place. It's right the backyard of few properties. It's purely a residential area. On the noise, I don't think so we would have any control on noise. There will be horrendous noise non-stop. I think this is a good idea if we could defer to a site visit.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Mindful of a previous planning application where it was refused on the basis of access for emergency vehicles on Uxbridge Common because the entrance wasn't wide enough, have we actually measured the width of because it's a very fixed access there, there's a brick wall on both sides, so there is no flexibility, and it is a rather narrow access, and I'm just concerned that tyres, given that last year there was a fire on Lansbury Drive as a result of tyres, how would that all be dealt with? And it comes under on page 31 where it says that there's going to be a gate put in with a width of 1.8 metres, etc., etc. But how how would a fire engine access that area, please? Well, for the deferred.
I will pass that over to officers to pick that point up.
I think the highway engineer wishes to comment.
Thank you, James. It's a difficult one because with this application it's an existing business on there for a car washing facility, so measures are probably already going to be put in place in terms of fire engines going up and down that access. I think what's going to happen is I think that the general protocol is if fire engines can access within 45 metres of a site. Now, yes, there's going to be a new electronic gate being put in on the access, but that's to formalise an existing arrangement and to better it. I don't think there's going to be an issue in terms of emergency vehicles going up and down it. I think what will happen is as long as they can access within 45 metres, it's fine. But yeah, I think that's what I have to say on that matter.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Councillor Dillon. You indicated?
I can't remember if I did indicate or not now.
It's a long time ago.
It was quite a while, yeah. I would expect, hopefully, if it's going to come back because we're going to defer it, but if the applicant's got half a brain, he would probably put in the mitigation points, and I hope he's watching, and might make a decision a little bit easier.
Okay, no, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. I thank Councillor Chandel for raising the issue about the inspector's points on page 31, which I think are very relevant and they're material to our considerations. About the fire engine, a car wash has already got a lot of water there, so fires are less risky, but tyres burning, as we all know, I mean, it's specialist waste anyway, and tyres burning are polluting in a quite dangerous way. So I think, Councillor Brightman is quite right to raise that issue here. It does say when was planning permission granted, because it's talking about this being a part retrospective planning permission for change of use. So I don't think it's got permission for tyres, has it? Because they're sui generis uses anyway, aren't they?
So yeah, if you page 28, it was approved car wash to use as a tyre fitting business
in 2018.
2019, yeah, September.
It didn't come before us. What a pity. The other thing is that the higher roof, which the petitioner mentioned, over 1 metre, I think I would also like those issues to be looked at, the height of the roof. And I do think that the noise report, it said here that it relates to a tyre business, not a combined use of tyre business and car wash or repair business. So we need to know exactly what's going on there in order to condition it. And pressurised ratchet guns, first thing in the early morning, I think is totally unacceptable anywhere near residential property. That is an industrial noise, and it shouldn't be anywhere near homes, I think, particularly early in the morning for families. So I hope all those issues can be looked at and come back to us, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to go and mention that I've put forward that we go for a deferral on this, on all the comments that we've raised this evening on this item, and come back at a later date.
Okay, so we have a mover to defer this particular item. Councillor Dillon, you happy to second that? Okay, can we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. So item 7 is deferred. Okay. Coming thick and fast this evening. So we now move on to item 8 on this evening's agenda, which is 31 Manor Lane, Hillingdon, and I'll pass over to Meg to do the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 31 Manor Lane, Hillingdon. The application is for the conversion of the roof space to habitable use, and it involves raising the ridge height of the building and the front and rear dormers. The site is located adjacent to the conservation area, as can be seen. So the boundary of the conservation area is the boundary of the site, and to the rear is conservation area, and these are listed buildings, these two Grade 2 listed buildings. So there are heritage assets to the rear of the site. The application was previously came to officers and was refused in 2018. This is the same application as was previously refused, or with minor amendments, so the overall size of the roof enlargement has been reduced from the previous. But other than that, it's a very similar application. The application is recommended for refusal on the basis of the increase in the height of the building and the size and scale of the rear dormer. Members will see from the photographs that the adjoining property at 29 has a loft conversion. It does have a very large rear dormer, but it hasn't increased the height of the roof, and therefore the works that were done to that property were permitted development, and an application for a front dormer was approved only on that. Everything else that has been done is permitted development, and as members will know, we cannot assess the design or the size and scale of the development. If it's permitted by law. In this particular case, permission is required because of the increase in the ridge height, and therefore it's been assessed against the council's policies and standards, and it has been found that it does not comply, and is recommended for refusal on that basis. So if I can go through the plans. This is the existing plan and roof plan, and the proposed. So the front of the property is in that direction. So the existing elevations and the proposed, the front elevation and then the rear. As you can see, the adjoining property does have rooms in the roof. It does have a front dormer, and in this particular case, officers are not objecting to the front dormer on this particular development. This is the site, and then the adjoining property here. And that's the dormer on the adjoining property, and as I said, it is permitted development. If I can just bring members' attention to the addendum, there is an error in the size of the, or what's indicated as being the size of the dormer, the rear dormer. On page 37 it's shown as being 7.992 metres. The correct width is 6.342, and that is shown on page 40. Also, in terms of, if I can go to page 41, third paragraph down, members will see that we did have objections from the council's conservation officer relating to the impact on the conservation area and the Grade 2 listed buildings to the rear, and it should form part of the refusal reason. The refusal reason has omitted reference to that, and I would ask members for delegated authority to the head of planning to amend the refusal reason to include the impact on the conservation area, the Grade 2 listed buildings, and the policies relating to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, this is our third petition of the evening, so I think we all know how that works now. But on that note, I would like to invite Mr. Singh to present on behalf of the organiser. Oh, right, so it's Miss Naya. Hello. So again, just to remind you, in case you weren't here for the first part of the meeting, you have 5 minutes this evening to address the committee. There's a traffic light system in front. You get 4 minutes on green. When it goes to amber, that's your last minute, and when it gets to red, I will have to bring you to an end. So if you want to press the grey button in front of you, and then we'll start timing from there. So over to you.
Hello and good evening. On the 7th of March 2019, I presented a significantly larger roof extension on behalf of my applicant to this committee, which was refused. The committee recommended that we resubmit a scheme which incorporates a smaller dormer at the rear with a reduced scale and bulk. So to summarise, the previous scheme was to raise the roof of the existing bungalow by 0.9 metres to a maximum height of 5.4 metres, so that it matches the property at number 29 Manor Lane, which is the one adjacent. The other aspect was to convert the existing hipped roof to gable ends on both sides, so that was the other big aspect that was different in this application. A dormer was proposed to the rear, which had a width of 10.2 metres. The previous comments included the fact that the principle of increasing the ridge height was acceptable. The scale of the dormer would have minor negative impact on the setting of the listed buildings, and the change of the hip to gable-ended roof profile would also have minor negative impact on the setting of the listed building. The rear dormer should be set in by 1 metre from the roof edge, and that a 1.2 metre gap from the side boundary should be maintained so that the building does not result in a terraced appearance. The committee's recommendation was therefore to reduce the overall width of the rear dormer. We then submitted a subsequent application in April 2019, and further amendments were also made during the last 12 months with the planning officer. Careful consideration was given to the points made at the committee and in the refusal notice. The main changes we made, which are significant, I disagree with the planning officer's comments there, they were significant. We reduced the dormer size by 3.86 metres. So from 10.2 metres we went down to 6.342. We also removed the gable ends at either side of the roof and introduced the fully hipped aspect, which is what committee members wanted us to look at. So to summarise, we've now made this dormer 1.5 metres shorter in width than the adjoining property. So overall 3.86 from the previous scheme and 1.5 smaller than the adjacent property. In the report, the Conservation Officer's comments specifically identify that the proposals are considered harmful to the setting of the heritage assets. However, I would like to point out that the rear dormer at number 29 is 1.5 metres wider than the one that we're proposing and also includes a Juliet balcony. But because this scheme was granted under permitted development, surely this is already setting a harmful precedent in this area. I'd therefore kindly like to ask you to consider that if the officers have such strong views on the setting of the listed buildings and conservation areas, then why were permitted development rights for the properties on Manor Lane not just removed by an Article 4 direction? And this is extremely important as the extension at number 29 is creating a significantly bigger negative impact, as it is much larger than the dormer proposed at number 31. Perhaps we could have a look at that photograph just as a reminder. We've worked with the planning officer for the last 12 months to present a scheme which addresses the committee's concerns and the officer's concerns, and architecturally we feel we've done this. We've kept the height of the house as low as we can. Now for building regs we have to have a 2.1 metre internal clearance, and that is exactly what we achieved with the new height of the dormer. The rear dormer is now significantly smaller, and the increase of the ridge height has been designed to match the bungalow at number 29 Manor Lane. We hope we've addressed the officer's concerns so that the bulk, mass and scale has been reduced, and the proposal does not make the house look two-storey from the streetscape, and maintains the bungalow appearance by retaining the hipped aspect. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you for addressing the committee this evening. So I'll invite members to ask you any questions. No questions? Thank you very much. You can return to your seats. I don't see any ward councillors from Heathrow Villages this evening, so we will open it up to members to debate. So who wants to kick us off? Councillor Chandel.
Thank you, Chairman. I just like the questions that were posed by the petitioner. If you could answer those questions, really, because you made a lot of valid points in terms of height. What are we going to do? Are we proposing that we're going to refuse an application because it's not as ugly as the one next door? I'm not quite sure. So they've made adjustments in the height. So if you could go for the points that they were raised, I think that would be beneficial for us.
You want to pick those up, Meg?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As I said in my introduction, there's no doubt that the adjoining property is ugly in terms of the rear dormer.
Sorry, that one a technical term.
That's a planning officer's term occasionally. If we had control over it, then clearly we would not have recommended approval for it. But we don't have control over it. It's been granted permission by the government through the legislation, therefore it's permitted development. There are many things that can occur under permitted development which members of the committee and myself and other officers would not recommend for approval. What comes before us is a planning application where we have to assess the visual impact and the impact on adjoining occupiers and so on against the council's policies. And that's what we have before us. And the council's policy is quite clearly set out on page 40, third paragraph down. Policy DMHD1 provides guidance for extensions and alterations to existing houses. Part E states that roof extensions should be located on the rear elevation only, etc., etc. What it does say is that it should not exceed more than 2/3 the average width of the original roof. It's not the amended roof or the extended roof, but the original roof. It should not extend 2/3 the average width of that roof. It should also leave a substantial element of the original roof. And your officers would argue that that isn't the case with a rear dormer here, and the changes that are made do impact on the street scene. They do impact on the elevations or the heritage assets to the rear, and that is why the application has been recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dilly.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope the person at the next door neighbour wasn't listening today, but he may still find out about those comments. Observation, sorry. I remember this application and I read it quite well. And the applicant has done quite a bit to address our concerns from last time. The other one that we did discuss was the impact of overlooking, I think it was, on the flats to the side. I don't know if that has been addressed, or if we could have a comment on that. But I'm happier with the hipped roof. The height, if it's in line with the neighbour, it's better than it was before. If you know the street scene at Manor Lane, it's pretty poor. It's varied, so whether it fits in or nothing fits into a street scene there. It's all different. It's an improvement on what it was, and it might not be in policy, but we need to look at each application as an individual application and not set a precedent. But you know what, it's not as bad as next door neighbour, and it doesn't affect the street scene in my view.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I accept that it's difficult for the applicant because they have made attempts to modify this. But in fact, this is a development which is under our control as the local planning authority. And whatever we think of the property next door, whether we think that that is good and it's something we should emulate or not, is almost immaterial because, as has been pointed out by officers, that was permitted development. And perhaps if it hadn't been permitted development, maybe our view would have been the same as it is on this property. So we have to follow our own policies. Yes, I'm sorry that the applicant has, gone to some lengths to attempt to make it acceptable, but clearly it isn't acceptable. And we can see from the size of the rear dormer, it is still very huge, out of proportion, and really not something that I'm afraid I could vote for. So I would move officer's recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Just on that, I mean, our old friend permitted development is there for us to work with or not, as the case may be, but we've also got to work with our own policies. So that's just a reminder to committee when considering this. Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Duncan must be reading my notes here. But, yet again, she's said a lot of what we were going to say. But could we just have some clarification from the officers? If the roof height was not being altered, so instead of it going up by 0.4 of a metre, that it was actually staying the same height, would this have gone through as permitted development?
There are two aspects. The increase in the roof height and the front dormer would need permission, so it wouldn't be permitted development unless the roof height was reduced and the front dormer was taken off.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to second Councillor Duncan's recommendation. And sorry, can I just say, by the way, we're very quick to sort of criticise officers' reports as we did earlier, but I thought basically it was a very good, clear-cut report. I just wanted to put that on record as well.
Okay, and duly noted. So you're happy to second that, but we've got a couple more comments to come. So, Councillor Chamdale?
Sorry, I was going to propose it that unfortunately it's not with adhering to policy, so I would go with the officer's recommendation. Reluctantly, but I would go, because it is a policy and it's there to be adhered to.
Okay, so we have it's been moved, it's been seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? So that's Councillor Dillon, you're abstaining, I take it. Okay. Well, that application is refused. Okay. Moving swiftly on to our last petition item of the evening. So let's go to item 9 on the agenda this evening, and Meg, over to you for taking us through it.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quickly, this is an application relating to 39 Station Road in West Drayton. It is an application for the change of use of the first floor residential unit to a restaurant, to a mixed use comprising restaurant. So it's an enlargement of the ground floor restaurant and takeaway use, and it also involves the installation of fire escape to the rear and minor alterations to the side and rear elevations. There are no issues relating to the fire escape or to the alterations that are proposed, and the issues relate to the loss of the residential unit. Members that have been on planning committee for a while will know that one of the main policies, if you like, in any London plan relates to the loss of residential units. And the first policy in any housing chapter is usually the one that says that we will not allow the loss of any residential units unless there are very exceptional circumstances. And that the reason for that is obviously the shortage of residential units in London and across the country, and the fact that the council is charged with providing a number of residential units by the London Mayor, and those units have to be provided, and if you start losing units at one end, then you have to provide additional units at the other end. Therefore, we would not allow the loss of residential units unless there are very good reasons to do so. If I can bring members' attention to page 53 and the second paragraph down, the issues relating to the condition of the unit, the applicant has stated that there is no insulation, heating, double glazing or soundproofing, has defective electrics, has a leaking roof, has zero structural settlement, inadequate toilet and kitchen facilities, and so on. Now, many of those things are matters that are of maintenance and so on, and would be expected to be sorted out, whether the property was in use as a residential unit or for any other use. There's no evidence of any structural defects that have been provided to the council to show why we should allow the loss of this residential unit. I would point out that the adjoining properties are also in residential use, and the issues relating to the cost, again, there's no evidence that's been provided to us to show that the costs are as stated, or that it wouldn't be a going concern as a residential unit if money was spent on it. So we found no reason in this particular case to override the policy relating to the loss of residential units, and for that reason it is recommended for refusal. If I can just take members through the plans. That's the proposed elevation showing the fire escape and alterations, mainly to the windows, and the floor plans. These are existing plans, and these are the properties. So it's this one, the Positano unit, and the one above, and to the rear. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Right, fourth and final petition item of the evening, but I'd like to therefore invite Isabella to come and join us in the front here. So I think you know the drill. 5 minutes, 4 on green, 1 on amber, red. I'll bring you to a conclusion. So when you press the grey button in the middle, the time will start for you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As I said, my name is Isabella Positano, and I'm one of the applicants of the proposal planning application for 39 Station Road. The application was submitted back in July 2019, but was previously refused. The reason in asking for a planning application is to change of use of the first floor, which is now vacant, and we would like to convert to a dining area for the use of the restaurant. Both myself and my husband established Positano Restaurant, which was opened back in 2017, has been running ever since. Furthermore, I would like to make more comments on the reason why we were refused our application. The first point was the loss of residential units. One of the most commented sections was regarding the loss of residential units. In recent years, we have seen the continuous development of houses and flats along the High Street, and it seems to be continuing in the nearest future. For example, we have Tavistock Road has almost completed the construction of 300 flats. I personally believe that it would be the loss of a very bad flat in bad condition that will take several months to refurbish, and you will need to add to that many more flats that were before A3 have been built. I mean, before we had in the high street, we had pubs that had been knocked down, and now we have residential units. On Station Road, there are 3 restaurants, including Positano, and before, I remember that the last one, because I've been living in West Drayton for 28 years, was opened in 1976. Neglecting the opening of places where residents can socialize force residents to travel outside the borough, with consequence that the area will not economically grow. The other point was the noise. As we care greatly about our neighbours and community, we have ensured to establish an excellent relation. We have consulted with a sound solution expert which specializes in insulation and prevention of noise. Based on this idea have been discussed, and the project which will introduce the insulation of floor and walls in order not to disturb the flat on either side of the restaurant. And I have a copy if you would like to view that. The rent. Another reason in introducing the expansion is due to the freeholder not wanting to invest in the refurbishment of the property. The flat is not suitable for renting out because of the access is through the backyard of the restaurant and fire escape route of the restaurant. Residents should walk through a small corridor, and at the end of the yard are located 4 waste bins for the duty of care. The flat is in very bad condition, and the investment it will be of £50,000. And we have attached some photo to the application that you can review. A local estate agent has carried out a survey, and the monthly rent for after the refurbishment will be of £950. But in the state that it is now, like I said, the freeholder does not have intention to refurbish the flat. Therefore, it would be empty. Another comment from the officer. There is also a concern that if approved, this will result in a strong precedent, and the other flats along the street will be converted into a non-residential use, resulting in further loss of residential units. I mean, this is, I would say, is inaccurate, because on the Station Road we have a solicitor, a dentist, a travel agent, an accountant. So what a restaurant will make the difference? I don't know if there is any other exception in the borough, but I believe that you could help us to make the exception, because it's really necessary for my business and for the community.
I'm going to have to bring you to a close now. Your 5 minutes has concluded, but thank you very much for addressing the committee this evening. Before you go, though, any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Milana.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very a small point. The food preparation is a ground floor, and you are now going to cook upstairs. It's just a dining area.
Okay, you can see the plan. We can be flexible in the sense that we are still working with our architect to find the best solution. Because, like I said, you raised the concern about the noise. So, we would like to have a second kitchen upstairs, but if that's a case that it could be caused to our neighbour, any noise or fume or whatever, we could just keep one kitchen downstairs. So mainly it's going to be used as just as a dining area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon, you had a question?
Thank you, Chairman. The rental quotation, did you pass that on to anybody?
No, I had the opportunity this morning to contact the estate agent, which is a local one, so he knows very well the area. And I have a quote if you want to see it.
And the photographs of the flat in its existing state,
The photo has been should be attached to the application.
Got nothing of the...
Don't have any internal photos, sorry.
Just to confirm, you're the leaseholder. The freeholder has no intention of renovating.
No.
And
I have a statement if you need. Yes, he gave me a statement that he has no intention to invest the money, and he doesn't have the money to do that.
Okay, and in its current form, it can't be let, or it can be let?
It can be let.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Brightman? Microphone, thank you.
Thank you. It can't be let. Are you currently in negotiation with them to purchase the freehold, or
no?
Are you going to lease?
I will have if the permission is going to be granted, then I will lease also the flat.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Don't see anybody else indicating to ask any questions, so thank you very much for your time this evening. If you can press the button and return to your seat. Thank you very much again for addressing us this evening. I see a ward councillor in the public area, Councillor Sweeting. Do I need to tell you about the 3 minutes? Okay. 3 minutes, two on green, one on amber, red. I'll bring it to a close. There you go.
I speak in support of this application. The report from officers in section 7.01 states the case in favour of this application very well, and I quote, "It is considered in this case based on a number of comments in support of the proposal, along with the petition in support that the existing restaurant is important within the local community and adds to the vitality of the Useley and West Drayton town centre. The petition signed by 117 residents also states the case very well, and that is highlighted in section 6. And I can comment with those items. Firstly, that more community facilities are needed to support the area's hugely increased population. 2, Positano contributes hugely to the improved feel of the area. Thirdly, the business brings quality to the high street. Fourthly, an expanded restaurant would encourage investment in the area. Next, the council needs to encourage independent businesses in this area. And finally, the population is increasing and there are not enough places to go and have a family meal. It is of course recognised that the area above the restaurant could, with great expense, be converted into living accommodation, but it won't be, as the expense needed would not be cost effective, and so what we have is that if the application is refused, then the business which needs to have the room to expand may well struggle. The committee could indeed consider this application under special circumstances, which would outweigh the potential loss of a single housing unit. And I believe that this application should be considered in this way, as the nearby Blues Bar, just 100 metres away, was an A3 business, and it was recently lost to residential use, creating 38 flats. And indeed, the whole of West Drayton and Useley have had huge increases in the number of housing units in the last few years, and even more in the pipeline with the new designation of urban rather than suburban in the local plan part 2. However, what we don't have are the community facilities to serve the huge population. Restaurants in the area are almost non-existent. What we are lacking are businesses which will bring more people to the area and which will provide local residents with excellent services. Positano is one such business, and I ask the committee to support this business by allowing its expansion, as it is indeed an excellent restaurant which needs room to expand. I thank the committee for considering my points.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Before you escape back to the public area, any questions for Councillor Sweeting? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman. One I forgot to ask the petitioner, so hopefully you'll be able to answer it. Do you know the length of time this flat has been empty?
Okay. Councillor Brightman?
Do you know if the freeholder has agreed to bring the property up to standard in order to expand it into an additional floor for the restaurant?
The freeholder is very supportive of Positano Restaurant and wishes it to be expanded upstairs.
Presumably to increase the rent and no capital outlay to him.
I couldn't comment on that. But he is a local businessman who is very supportive of the High Street in West Drayton.
Okay. Don't see any other councillors indicating, so thank you, Councillor Sweeting, for your address to the committee this evening. Before we open up to members, I think I want to bring in James.
So policy DM2TCC1, sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful, Part 2 local plan, yes, it does refer to exceptional circumstances. However, policy 3.14, the London plan, is also relevant, and that doesn't have any leeway in the policy. So the problem here is that, and I'll refer to the London plan policy, so I'm just going to read part of the policy, but I'll read it exactly as it is written. So the policy in the London plan on existing housing stock says loss of housing, including affordable housing, should be resisted unless the housing is replaced at existing or higher densities with at least equivalent floor space. So basically the policy doesn't allow the straight loss of housing, whether it's good, bad or poor quality. It just says the loss of housing will be resisted, and that's because there's a housing need in London, and potentially the last thing you want to do is lose existing housing, thus adding to the amount of housing that needs to be provided. So the problem with this application is you'd actually have to go completely against the London Plan strategic policy to allow the proposal, which puts it in a different context from any of the other applications before you this evening. If this had been a proposal where we were looking at the business expanding sideways, say, and it was the vacant unit, or then our retail policies, there is some more flexibility in those, and often as a committee, we, to ensure vacant units are used, we've looked flexibly at different use classes that are not A1, where local businesses are successful and wish to expand. But the problem with this application, and the reason why it's for refusal, and it's kind of written in a quite black and white way, is there's some quite serious policy issues with this proposal. So I'm afraid, much as it kind of slightly pains me to be speaking against a successful local business, there's actually some quite serious policy issues to do with this proposal.
Okay, thank you for that interjection, James, and I think those words will be mulled over by members as we have the debate. So I think Councillor Chandler, you indicated first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that, James. We've got two policies, one saying no exceptions and one saying exceptions. Now, this is in the report. Yep. So the question I was going to ask is, what would we consider exceptional circumstances? I understand the plan about losing a housing. At the moment, if it's proved, and it does say there's no evidence provided about rent, and we've got no pictures in front of us to show the condition of the flat. So basically, what we're saying, there's a flat there which is not rented out because it cannot be, for whatever reason the applicant has said so. We haven't got it in front of us, so we can't make a decision on that. The question I'm asking is, what will we deem as exceptional circumstances? Taking the London plan out of the way for a second, I understand, I'll go with policy every single time, but I understand this is one unit. I understand the precedent bit. So what would deem it to be an exceptional circumstances?
If I can perhaps answer, I was trying to think of examples of when we've allowed loss of a residential unit. We have for health facilities, so dentists, doctors' surgeries. I'm sure we have on North Committee. I'm trying to think, and I'm trying to be honest with the committee, I can't in recent years think of an example that actually relates to a retail example similar to this particular case. So I'm rather stuck in terms of helping committee on this particular one. I think is how I'd put it in simple terms.
Sorry, can you just come back on that? So, would we then say it's an on-balance thing? Something we have said in the past. It's not a phrase that I like whatsoever.
I don't think this is on balance.
If it's not on balance, it's policy. Then if it's policy, then we've got to go with policy and say, go with the officer's recommendation. I'll be open to other
I
councillors.
personally don't think it's on balance.
Okay. Well, that's some good points come out of there, but let's go around the room because people have indicated. So, Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there a mechanism for the council to be able to enforce the current freeholder to bring that up to spec? And if so, how would you mitigate the impact that would have on the existing business below?
Pick that one up.
I mean, there is housing legislation that deals with empty homes, but I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on that. I think I'd have to defer to others.
My question was, I suppose, because if it's to be brought up to spec in line with policy, then that planning application is going to come before you, because obviously it needs the kind of numbers quoted would be quite significant improvements required, and that would have an impact on the business below, and I wondered how that would be handled.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of bringing it back up to spec, I'm not sure that there are any planning issues involved with that. It's mostly repair and refurbishment. There are no issues relating, unless they want to extend the property or to do works to the roof in terms of extending the roof, then to bring it back up to a habitable level wouldn't require planning involvement. It may require building regs, it may require other parts of the council. In terms of the housing legislation that James refers to, there is housing legislation which deals with empty properties, and it may be possible that we can ask our housing colleagues to look at that. But there is no issues, or there's nothing in the planning legislation which allows us to enforce the bringing back, other than to refuse applications for alternative uses, if you like.
Okay.
And if we are looking, if members are maybe thinking that this is one unit, it is one unit, but the loss of every unit requires provision of additional units elsewhere in the borough. Members know the issues relating to provision of housing. They've debated it numerous times across the borough. They know how hard it is to get additional units in the borough, and therefore every loss of residential unit requires the provision of other residential units. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dillon?
Which way? This is a tricky one. Currently, this is a loss of a unit because it's not going to be rented out. It's not going to be refurbished. So it's essentially a loss of a unit, or it isn't a unit because it's not being let at the moment. We don't know the length of time that it has been vacant, which makes life a little bit more difficult. And I haven't read all of that London plan like James has 3 times. But I would ask him, is there anything in there that would say something has been vacant for a period of time and it can be converted? I dare say it isn't, because you would have mentioned it, but I'll ask anyway.
There's a line in the report where it says this would result in a strong precedent for other flats along the high street. Probably that wasn't worded, I'll be honest, in the cleverest way, because the potential precedent here applies to the whole of Hillingdon. It's not just usually high street. And the problem, I think, if you allow this, the problem you're going to have is with members is why would you then refuse any other successful restaurant business expanding in residential flats above? And then, you know, if you start looking into the level of damp, how long is a piece of string? I don't think, and I certainly wouldn't wish to defer this to have the applicant paying for surveyor's reports that then still result in a refusal. So I don't feel I can help you a lot with this one.
Okay, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I was a planning officer. Loss of residential, it's a sacred policy. And I put it as strongly as that. You did not go against this. But, guess what? I'm going to speak against this recommendation. And I'll tell you why. Because we have multiple responsibilities, and one of them is the vitality and viability of our town centres and local centres. Most of them, as in Useley and West Drayton, are just narrow ribbons. You can't extend backwards. They're residential areas. That's where families live. They come down to the high street. We're now living in the 21st century. Where do you go? Where do you expand? You can only go upwards if you can't go back. And that has been the situation in Hillingdon, in a lot of local centres, for some time. In West Drayton, we've had a huge increase in population. In the ward, it was 9,000 plus. It's now 12,000 on the electoral register. That's the number of people who've come in onto the electoral register. And they will have children. There will be other people who won't be on the electoral register for whatever reason. So, huge increase in population. We've got certain facilities. Crossrail is coming through. So hopefully, when they repair the holes in the station, we'll have better connectivity. Fabulous investment. Also, the council is going to put in leisure facilities, new swimming pools, proposing that. Fantastic. But you've still got this centre which is very, very constrained. Normally, we don't look at viability in these. Some units have gone from retail to residential. And I named some that are in Fairfield Road, which Councillor Willana will know. At the top of Fairfield Road, there were some shops. They were on the fringe of the town centre. They couldn't really maintain viability. They were allowed on the ground floor to become residential units. So if we're going to keep track of change between retail and residential, we can show very good examples where we have lost retail units where they weren't viable. And isn't that a case for making that argument to say, look, we're looking at the practicalities here. The people who run the restaurants do not own the flat. They can't do anything about that. The owner of that flat has had assessments made. It's going to cost a lot of money. So for all practical purposes, we're not going to see that. If this was a flat that was in residential use at the present time, we would be talking about a loss of a unit. We'd be talking about if there's a family there at the moment, they're going to move out, then that's not going to be available to rent to anybody else. If we look at the plans, just look at this. This is the high street. Here's a bedroom, here's a box room, here's a wall, here's a living room. You can't live like that. This is not modern living. I'm sorry. You know, we're talking about a residential unit. Look, it might as well be some old leaking caravan at the back of a yard. Really, let's be practical. Let's talk about it in real terms. And so, I think, you know, for those reasons, we do take viability into account in certain applications. Like, for example, when applicants say we can't provide more affordable housing, we can't afford it. So we do take costs of things into account, and in relation to housing and provision of housing, a number of housing units. This is one unit. We're not talking about the whole row going. We're talking about, this is maintaining the viability of the town centre allowing a successful business to grow. If there was a shop vacant next door, I'm sure that the owners would be going there because that would be the obvious place to go. They can't, so they're going up. So that is why I'm afraid on this occasion I never thought I would vote against a loss of residential, but I find the evidence for it quite compelling. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, if the flat has been vacant for a long time, obviously we already have a loss of one residential unit. We need housing. I'm not against the policy, but I'm in the support of this initiative because if it's solely used for dining, because if there is a kitchen upstairs, then there will be an issue of noise and a smell, you know. So yeah, I like this initiative.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what's happened tonight, because again, I'm supporting Councillor Duncan on this. Okay, yes, in the previous application we said policy is policy and that's it, but we do have to have give and take. You know, we have a flat that if that came up for approval today, we'd be kicking it out. You know, no way could you live in a flat like that. It's been derelict. It's been derelict for some time. It's a shame that we haven't got evidence to say how long this has been derelict, because then that would actually add weight to the argument against the officer's recommendations. I'd like to try and support the applicant on here, and you know, really I'm looking for the officers to try and give us some support. But one thing we do have to remember is that each planning application that comes to us is based on its merits, not what's happened previously. Yes, we look at that, but it's done on its merits at that particular moment. If you're a landlord, yes, you would get more renting out a flat than you would renting it out as commercial property. The landlord is saying it's going to cost him too much. We have a company here that's saying, look, we could work with this. We could make our business great, and at the same time, return something to the community. Officers, please help us on this.
Okay. Whilst James and Meg are conferring, we've also got Councillor Chandau who's indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Time's moving on. I think we have to make a decision here. We have, on one hand, we have policy. I was thinking that a way where we can make this work, where would we get that exceptional circumstance of evidence that we haven't got here, which is pictures of the flat, how long it's been vacant, and what do we do? Can we defer it until there's more there? Will it help us in that? Or what I can feel from the general gist of every member here is that we don't go against officers' recommendations without actual something that we have that we can actually sort of put meat on the bone. It's not just a personal thing. Do we have enough here? I'm not sure. We have a policy which says, no, it's a housing, it's a no. But then, as we said, we've got to be flexible. And I am personally now leaning towards the point that we need to be flexible. So that's my hang on it.
Okay. James, did you have a...
Well, I mean, my part of my remit is actually economic development, so I do have sympathy for
Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Sweeting, can I ask you to return to your seat? And can you take that phone as well, please?
The reason why it can't be shared is because it's all information has to be provided 48 hours before the committee, and there's a prejudice. So if it's been provided, then there's no need to pass it around.
Councillor, I'm afraid we can't accept that, Councillor. So, Councillor James?
Yeah, I was just going to, I mean, my only concern, really, to be honest, is protecting the committee from other proposals that you might wish to refuse. So it's the precedent here that's actually really concerning me. I mean, if you deferred to do a site visit or get a report, that might help things. My only concern with the report option is that lots of applicants might then think they get a surveyor's report and it's a way to bypass the policy. So I'd actually, and also, as I said earlier, then surveyor's reports don't always help matters, but they do cost the applicant. So I'd probably be leaning more towards a site visit, and then at least members could, in the minutes, if they go against officers on this, say, well, we've been to the site, we kind of think the best option is that it's converted to a restaurant, and at least you've then done a site visit, and that might put you in better stead when you are at a future date, and I'm sure this will apply, refusing other applications where other applicants may not have a petition, may not be as quite a sort of cherished local business, but they may feel quite strongly that they should be allowed to convert a residential unit. So my concerns here are protecting you from other proposals.
And I think before we open up, and as a couple of other councillors have indicated there, is that the role of this committee is to take on board the policies that we have to work with. We have a very successful business here that wants to extend, and that's to be congratulated, but we do have an obligation to, one, work within the policies that are set in front of us, and to be mindful of precedents that we're setting for the future. So I'd just like members to be mindful of that when they are deliberating over this. But we've got Councillor Chandell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to go for a site visit, have a look at the place myself. I've seen some bad buildings in my past. I can make a judgment on that, see what is really available for us, and that way I think it will make me sleep a bit easier that I'm not going against policy. So I'd like to formally propose we defer this for a site visit.
Yeah, just before I second that, Councillor Morgan made a couple of good points, actually. One, that a landlord would always go for the highest rent because he's greedy, being one that I know. And he's likely to get less from a restaurant, second floor restaurant dining area than he is from the flat. And that was a really good point. So it's in his economic interest to actually let it. And I agree with everything that Councillor Chandell said. We don't have the evidence, we don't have the photographs, we don't have the estate agent report saying how long it's been vacant for. Therefore, I'm happy to propose a site visit so that we have.
You happy to second that, because I think Councillor Chandell
apologise. Yeah,
has moved it. But before we go to a vote, Councillor Ahmed Moulana indicated.
Mr. Chairman, just to echo to what's been said, if it's helpful to defer for a site visit. I mean, we don't want to go against the policy, and we do not want to set up a precedent that every flat is going to turn into a restaurant. But of course, we would like to support the local business as well. So I'm happy what is being proposed and seconded.
Okay, right. I think that's. Sorry, do you like to come in, Kerry?
Saying, with the site visit, I mean, the development plan is what should be followed, because that's the council's vision for the area. But with this, it's qualified with an exceptional circumstance test. So if, as you as decision makers feel that there's some information missing, then a site visit sounds appropriate to get further information with regards to how long the property's been emptied is good material for you all to make a final decision, final conclusion. So it sounds practical.
Okay, thank you for that input, Kerry. So we have a mover and we have a seconder, so can I take show of hands for deferment and a site visit? That is unanimous. Okay, so item 9 is deferred. Okay. Members and officers will be pleased to know that that is all of the petition items dealt with. So we can move. Not that we don't like petition items, but we'll move on. So we now go to item 10, which is the Travel Lodge over in Stockley Park.
Chairman, I'll try and be very brief over the next 6 or 7 items.
Hang on a second, because someone's left something. Councillor Brightman misses any of the Councillor Brightman misses any of the presentation. She can't take part in the vote. Oh, she's back. Good. Continue.
Right. So item 10, Travelodge Hotel on Stockley Park. This is an existing building. The site, as you can see, is within the green belt, which is the reason why the application is before you. It is for 4 signs on the building. It's still being constructed, or was when the officers went on site. These are the signs that are going on there. They're in those positions, as you can see, 1, 2 and 3, and then the 4th one, if I can find it, there. And those are what it looks like, and that's what it is when the officer visited the site. So unfortunately, you'll have to imagine what the building looks like with the signs on it, but within the context of the size of the building, the signs are acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon, you indicated?
I know the site really well. Quicker it's finished, the better, so let's approve it. I've got no problems with it.
You're moving officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chapman, I think you got up there first.
Yep, second that,
Happy
Chairman.
to second that, okay. Can we have a show of hands for that one, please? Unanimous. Item 10 is approved. Okay. Item 11, 56B Wood End Green Road in Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a site which has enforcement history. The site is also within the Hayes Village Conservation Area, and we have served enforcement notice against the existing dormer. An appeal against that notice has been lost, and the current proposal is to amend the dormer, or to remove the dormer and build a new one, which in essence is very similar to the existing one, and therefore it's recommended for refusal. If I can just go to the plans and point out the difference. This is the proposed dormer. The only difference is being that the current one, it stretches across the full width of the roof, so it's set in by 500 on either side. I'll show you the photographs, that's it there. So the amendment is to reduce it by 500 on either side and bring it down the roof slightly. Other than that, there is no amendments, and we're recommending refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Move officer's recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Morgan? Second that one. So can I have a show of hands for that one, please? That's, can we have a show of hands? That's unanimous. Thank you. So it's too quick for me there, Councillor. So that item 11 is refused. Okay. Item 12, Hillingdon Hospital.
Members will recall this application coming before committee not very long ago for 20 bed space decant ward. This is a slight increase in the size of the building to provide 28 bed spaces. The parking numbers have been increased by 4 to comply with the requirements. There's no loss of additional or net loss of parking on the site, and again it's recommended for approval subject to the section 106. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. I think James wants to come in at that point.
This is a very straightforward proposal, so there isn't an awful lot more to say on it. However, because effectively the trust got additional funding, so they've enlarged the facility, but and the trust is very keen to deliver this as soon as possible. But members should note on page 77, recommendation D. So the consultations haven't quite expired on this. So the way I've worded it is, if we don't get any objections, I'm asking you delegate to me to determine it as set out in the report. If there is an objection, and I would clarify there was no objections to the previous application, and it's right in the middle of the hospital, it's not on the boundaries, therefore it's unlikely in my view we'll get an objection. But if there is an objection, the way I'm wording it is then the final decision rests with myself in conjunction with the chairman and Labour lead, so that we can then look at what the objection is, and in all likelihood hopefully it will be addressed in the report in any case. But it's just, I think it's important I clarify there is a slightly different recommendation than what you normally get, but it's because we're wanting to help the hospital deliver urgent facilities here.
Thank you, James. Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. It's welcomed. I would like more parking, but what can you do? Square box round hole. But I'm looking forward to the application when it comes in for a new hospital. Now we've got the money. So for this, I would like to go with the officer's recommendation with the delegated authority to the head of planning.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah. Could I just ask a question? Where is Column Green Park, where they're going to put the environment? Is that just further along Peeled Heath, or is it down Column Green Road and just before you get to what was the Crown pub, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. I just wanted to clarify where it was.
It's to the east. It's the open space you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to the east of the site plan at the back of the report. So, yeah, in terms of north, south, east, west, I know it's to the east, but unfortunately the site plan doesn't quite expand far enough to show it to you. But I can tell you in terms of the geography, it's the open space to the east of that plan. Sorry if that doesn't fully answer your question.
So it's further along Peeled Heath Road, isn't it? Is it sort of almost opposite the Texaco garage?
It's it's the open space over here. Have I got that right?
Where's that? Sorry? Whereabouts?
No, that slide slightly confused me. I don't know.
No, that's the car park.
Or something.
That's the car park, James.
No, that side.
I don't think there's Wiseale down there, and then it's Brunel Land down there, so it won't be that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy that there is. It's just that there is this proposal. I'm not objecting to it. I just wanted to know where it was really. But anyway, as long as there's going to be improvement within the area, that's the main point.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy to second if it's already been proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Haven't seen any other councillors indicate. So we have someone who's moved, someone who's seconded. Can I have a show of hands for this application, please? That is unanimous. So item 12 is approved. Now, item 13, it wouldn't be a Central and South Planning Committee without a telephone mast. So, only one this week, or month. So, Meg, do you want to give us an overview on this?
Thank you, Chairman. This relates to the Skyport telephone exchange on Newell Road within the Heathrow Airport boundaries. Unusually, the mast isn't on the ground, but on the roof of the building. And there are existing telecoms equipment there, and this is a replacement and additional. So that's the existing that you can see there, and the proposal is there. So it's an increase in height and size of the equipment, but in general in the same position. So no great visual impact, and therefore we're recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ahmed Maulana.
Mr. Chairman, we welcome 5G, and I would like to move with the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. We had a couple of other councillors indicate. Councillor Duncan.
Seconded.
You're seconded. Councillor Dillon.
I have no problem with this. Just one point. Do we normally add a condition on the ones on the ground as far as a landscaping condition? And if we don't, could we, in future, just look at those? Because
The ones on the ground, we don't normally have a landscape condition unless there's surrounding, because usually it's on the footpath. But if it's on a grass verge or something, then we might be able to add that.
We've certainly been exploring colours of cabinets, haven't we, to sort of fit in with the street scene. So
we put on the condition as well that when it's no longer needed, that it be removed. We haven't put that on this one, I don't think, have we? What's that?
Page 104, Councillor.
Condition 3, sorry.
Or is it condition 3? I'm looking at the wrong one.
Page 103. Page 103, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. It is.
It's got the yellow pages to come, yeah?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Borough, you indicated.
No, just support the...
Okay, you're in support of it as well. So we have moved, we have it seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Agenda item 13 is approved. I know, that's how we all feel. But we'll plough on. So to agenda item 14, we're now looking at 108 Vine Lane in Hillingdon. So Meg, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This relates to the ACS Hillingdon International School. Again, this application is before you because the site is in the Greenbelt. It's a very minor alteration to provide maintenance access, really, staircase. It's set well back from the front of the site, and that's its siting, so it's set behind a parapet. That's its siting there. You'll not see it from the ground level. You'll need to be looking very carefully if you're far away to see it at all. So it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Morgan.
I'll go with officer's recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Brightman, you was quick.
Seconding.
You were seconded. Did you indicate, Councillor Dillon?
I'm all right with it now.
Okay, so we have it moved, we have it seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. So agenda item 14 is approved. Okay. Final item of the evening under part 1 of this evening's agenda. So item 15, over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Chairman. This is relating to 3 to 5 Vine Street, which is next to Randall's. And the application, members will see that permission was granted for office space and residential with associated parking. This application is to remove the parking for the residential element, subject to a section 106, which requires that any residential or any residents that go into the new units are not entitled to a parking permit within the parking management area. The site is in a very sustainable location, PTAL 6, and therefore it's considered to be acceptable, and that is the only change that is being proposed, so recommended subject to a section 106. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm fine with it, but yeah, no big surprise.
Okay, Councillor Duncan?
I would like disabled parking put in because for residents, yes, it's wonderful for those who can use public transport, but it's also an ideal location for people who are able to get out into the town centre easily, but if they wish to travel, they very often need a vehicle, so I'd like some disabled parking, please.
Is that something we can...
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost thinking, well, I'm unsure why we haven't got one disabled bay. I think there should be a disabled bay.
I mean, it's ideal having town centre locations for disabled people and elderly people, but then, you know, they do come, sometimes, some of them do need a disabled parking space. So.
I can hear the words agree being whispered all
Thank
along
you,
here.
thank you. So if that could be still retained, please. Thank you.
No, thank you. Councillor Chamdale?
Yeah, I was going to say I was agreeing with Councillor Dillon's reaction that we expect this, where we applications go through this and come back to us with that. But again, I agree with Councillor Duncan's suggestion about disabled parking, and then we can go with the officer's recommendation.
Are you moving that?
I think.
Are you moving that?
I'm moving that. Yeah.
It's delegated authority to me.
We'll delegate authority and all the rest of that.
Update it so it has a disabled bay.
Okay, yeah. So you're moving it?
Yeah, I'm moving
Councillor?
it.
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Duncan? So show of hands, please. Unanimous. Item 15 is approved. That brings us to the end of part 1. And for those who are watching us on YouTube, we are now going to